an old television show. Some of you may be too young to remember this. You aren't as old and as seasoned as I am. But there was a television show back in the day called The Ed Sullivan Show. Many of you have maybe heard of this. And there's a classic video clip from The Ed Sullivan Show of this performer whose talent was being able to spin a bunch of breakable bowls and plates all at the same time, all by himself. Some of you may have seen this before, but the way he did it is he had this long table in front of him. And he had these long metal poles, and so he'd set a pole on the table, and he'd kind of get it jiggling a little bit. And then he'd take a ball and spin it on his finger and put it up on top, and it would spin around. So you can visualize it. And then he'd take a plate, and he'd get it with his finger and get it spinning on the table. So now he had two dishes spinning around, and he'd take another metal pole, and he'd jiggle it. He'd get a bowl going, and he'd stick it up there. So now there were three dishes spinning all at the same time. Well, before he could start a fourth dish, the first one was starting to slow down a little bit, so he'd come over here and jiggle it a little bit, got a plate going. Now we had four. Now he wanted to start a fifth, but now these two were slowing down, so he had to get the second and third. He got a pole, spun it around, so now he had five going. Well, he was about to get a sixth, but now one and four were starting to slow down, so he had to jiggle, spin, and spin. And on and on and on, he went up and down and left and right, over and over. And after a while, he had so many plates and bowls spinning in front of him and above him that it seemed like if he ever stopped to just take a breath, then everything would just come crashing down. Has your life ever felt like that? I think that's a knowing laugh. Does your life ever feel like that? With the start of school just a few days away, I know of many parents who will constantly be going, dropping children off at school, racing to work, picking up this child and taking him to that practice, picking up that child and taking her to that rehearsal, running home to make dinner, help with homework, get the kids ready for bed, do laundry, wash dishes, say hello to their spouse for the first time all day, and then catch a few hours of sleep so they'll have the strength to do it again the next day, and the day after that, and the day after that. All of those commitments and activities can be dizzying. It can feel as though if you just stop to take time to breathe, that all of the things will come crashing down. Of course, that's not just true for parents. I know children who will soon get up early every single day. They'll get ready for school really fast. They'll rush off to school. They'll spend the whole day at school, and then they'll go to this rehearsal and that practice and that extracurricular activity. Sports, band, chorus, scouts. Almost every single night of the week, followed by dinner, then homework, then bed. Rinse and repeat. Right? Now, it's not just kids. I've also known people who are retired. who feel as though they have all of these plates and bowls spinning above their heads. I know retirees who are raising their grandchildren or who are caring for their children and their parents. Even among those who aren't, I've heard quite a few people say, "I'm so busy. When on earth did I ever find time to work?" I've heard some of you say this. Whether it's because of volunteering or recreational activities or doctor's appointments, it can feel like everything is spinning above us, and if we stop long enough to breathe, then everything will come crashing down on us. Now, I dare say that even in the church, sometimes we can run ourselves church with one of the leadership teams, and he said, just to help me understand your expectations of me, I want you to write down a list of all the things you expect me to do every week, and the amount of time every week you expect for me to do it. And so they came up with a list, and it was really long. Visit this many people from the church every week. Spend this long preparing sermons, of course, on your day off every week. Go to this many meetings. Spend this much time answering phone calls and emails. Spend this much time planning worship and doing outreach and serving on community boards and committees and going to all of the youth and children's sporting events. And on and on and on the list went. And when he added it up, it was only a little bit over 100 hours a week. Now, hopefully we don't all run ourselves quite that ragged. But those of us in the church, nevertheless, probably find ourselves sometimes feeling overextended and stressed and busy. We have work commitments and family commitments and community commitments and church commitments. And as if that weren't all enough on its own, we each carry our own pains and struggles. We have those things that we are hoping to get better from. We carry grief over people we've lost and over situations from the past that we really like that we wish were still the case. With all those things that even we in the church carry, it can sometimes feel like if we were to just stop long enough to breathe, and everything would just implode in itself and come crashing down. With so many commitments and responsibilities and obligations and burdens resting on our backs and vying for our attention all of the time, I will confess that when I hear that nameless author from the book of Hebrews tell us, now run the race, my first reaction is, maybe yours is too. Run the race? I'm already tired. And you want me to add something else to my schedule for my emotionally and physically tired self to do? One more responsibility to carry out after I get the car washed? Well, I just wrote that off years ago. After I get the car fixed? After I pay my bills? After I go to that appointment? I'm already tired and drained. And now I have to run a race. Have you ever been there? Maybe you're there, you don't have to raise your hand. But running a race might not sound like the best thing that we would like to do. In the midst of our busyness, and our stress, and our being overextended. But friends, what if I told you that the invitation to run with perseverance the race that is set before us is actually not a curse or a burden, but is a blessing? It is a blessing, especially to those of us who feel worn out and ragged. What if I told you that it's an opportunity to set aside the rat race, to instead run that race where we actually get somewhere, and where we're free to do the things that God has made us and called us to do? What if I told you that the race that is set before us is an invitation to move beyond the inch of progress that it sometimes feels like we're making in a million different directions, to instead direct all of our focus and energy not only toward a single end, but towards the only end that is truly worth pursuing? One of my favorite books that I've read within the past few years is by a fellow named Greg McCown, and the book's called Essentialism, and I would highly recommend it to anybody who's looking for something to read. But in that book, he says something about the word priority. A lot of times we throw around the word priority. And he says the word priority came into the English language in the 1400s. And it was singular. It meant the very first or prior thing, and it remained that way for 500 more years. It was turning it into a plural, priorities. As McCown says, we began illogically imagining that we could have multiple first things. And because we tried to put everything first, we ended up a lot like that plate spinner, moving all around, looking up and down, and moving side to side at the mercy of all of those things spinning above our heads that are just waiting to come crashing down. You can't really have multiple priorities. Otherwise, we just run ourselves ragged. But the nameless author of Hebrews offered another way to live, a better way to live. That writer first said, lay aside every weight and the sin that clings so closely. Do any of you ever feel like you are carrying around these invisible weights on your shoulders? Or maybe you are and you don't even realize it. I want you to try something. Clench your fist. All right? If you're watching at home on Facebook Live, you can do it too. Clench your fist and take a deep breath and just hold it. Do you feel that pressure? And the weight? And how tight everything is? Now let it out. Do you feel how much better that feels? Now try it again. Tighten up and just take in a deep breath and hold it. Feel that pressure, the weight, and now let it go. The writer of Hebrews said, let go of all of that weight that you carry, that weighs you down, that makes it so hard to put one foot in front of the other, in front of the other, in front of the other. How often, though, do we go through life racing around, holding on to all of that, as though the world depends on us? You know, I don't know about you, but sometimes I go through life and I think that, if I let this thing fall and it breaks, the world's going to go spinning off of its axis. And yet, as many times as I have let something fall or as something has fallen because I just couldn't juggle it all, guess what is the only thing that has never happened? The world has never spun off its axis. And yet sometimes we hold on to all of these things as though the world depends on us, forgetting that there is somebody far greater than us who holds and sustains them. Lay aside every weight, the author of Hebrews says, and run with perseverance the race that is set before us. Now again, I recognize that running a race may not be the most exciting thing that we could dream of doing with all the busyness that we often find ourselves in. So I want to put it into a little bit of perspective. A little over a year ago, some friends and I got the really bright idea that we were all going to run a half marathon. Now, actually what we agreed to do was we were going to run the Myrtle Beach mini marathon. But what we quickly discovered is that is horrible false advertising because there was nothing mini about 13.1 miles. They should just call it a half marathon. And to be honest with you, training for a race that long was not one of the most pleasant things I've ever done. For one, I had to put my body through things that weren't pleasant just to be able to run that far without stopping. That was farther than I had ever gone before. But second, because the race was going to be on a Sunday morning, and because there were some not smart preachers who didn't have the foresight to realize I should probably take that Sunday morning off, I had to train my body to run it fast enough to get done, walk to church, change clothes, and preach. Again, not the most foresight in the world. But when the day of the race came, having done all that preparation and put myself through all those things, all that I had to do when the race came was just run. I didn't have to worry about the race, he showed me a picture he'd taken for me. It was kind of embarrassing. I was grinning from ear to ear in the middle of a half marathon. And he said, Jonathan, why? Why would you ever be so happy in the middle of a race? I said, well, honestly, I was just kind of in Forrest Gump mode. I was running. And that was all I had to do. It was great. When the author of Hebrews tells us to run with perseverance the race that is set before us, I hear in that the same kind of freeing experience that I had in that race last year. The writer wasn't talking about adding yet another thing to the many other things that we're already doing, but rather devoting ourselves fully and freely to that which God has made us and called us and equipped us to do. We're equipped, and so just run. And as we run that race, the writer tells us to look to Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith. Now, earlier I used the example of that plate spinner from the Ed Sullivan show to talk about how in our busy lives we often try to focus on a bunch of different directions, and that our eyes are constantly darting up and down and left and right as we try to keep everything from crashing down. And I want to share with you another example that somebody shared with me, and I got to find it here. Somebody asked me before the service, they said, why do you have a baseball bat? I said, for protection. But I will be very clear. I am stealing this example. Thou shalt not steal unless thou givest credit for the person from whom thou hast stolen it, right? That's in the Bible probably somewhere. And so our district superintendent, Steve Patterson, we all got to meet about 2 months ago. He shared this example. But he was talking about how a lot of times in our lives, as we juggle all these different things, we kind of try to balance them all like this baseball bat. And so we have the things that God is trying to do in the world and is calling us to do in the world over here. And then we have over here the things that we oftentimes treat as most important and try to wear ourselves out doing because we're worried about what will happen or what other people will think of us if we let this part fall. And so he said all the time we try to find balance by keeping the things that God's worried about and the things that we're worried about in balance. One's not higher than the other. He said, so we try to balance it, but the problem is that it's really hard to do, and that one's always swaying higher than the other. But he said, it's funny what happens if you take this and you turn it around. And you take the things that God is trying to do in the world and you put those above the things that you always wear yourself out doing. And notice where my eyes are looking. Where are they looking? At the top. At Christ. When the writer of Hebrews said to keep our eyes on Christ, the author and perfecter of our faith, I think that's what he was talking about. In the midst of all the busyness and the craziness and the stress and all those things pulling and tugging at us, know where to keep our eyes. Know where to look for what's most important. So often, my friends, we burden ourselves and we stretch ourselves thin and we load ourselves down. And sometimes we even do that in the name of God, as though God's kingdom isn't going to come just because we don't do this one thing. And my friends, if that's where you are now, or that's where you anticipate being as soon as this next school year starts, then hear these words. Lay all that weight aside. Lay it aside. And run with joy and perseverance, not every single race that is beckoning for your attention, but just that one that Christ has called you onto. And as you do it, keep your eyes not down below,